Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to get started. Welcome to Gardening Green Expo 2025. The Expo is sponsored by the North and South Rivers Watershed Association, the Water Smart Program, and Kennedy's Gardens. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few things. We'll be taking questions after the lecture, so if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A and we'll go over them at the end of the talk. And I also may post some links in the chat as well. Our featured presenter tonight is renowned author Doug Tallamy. With Bringing Nature Home, Tallamy changed the conversation about gardening in America. His second book, the New York Times bestseller Nature's Best Hope, urged homeowners to take conservation into their own hands. This year, he will be presenting a talk from his upcoming book, How Can I Help? Saving Nature with Your Yard. And now, here's Doug Tallamy.
Thank you, Lori. How can I help? Saving Nature with Your Yard. That is the title of the book coming out in April. Let me just remind you what you already know. We are evolutionary guests on this planet, we being humans, and our stay here is provisional. If we destroy our life support systems, then our residency on the planet is going to be a short one. Now, every person on the planet depends entirely on the quality of Earth's ecosystem. So I think every person then bears the responsibility of taking care of those ecosystems. And fortunately, more and more people are accepting that responsibility. But they need more knowledge to act on it. One of the places to try to get that knowledge is my email. They send me emails pretty much every day. And these are people that have read my books, they have heard my talks, and they still have really good questions. So I decided to create this book. It's 499 questions and their answers concerning the things that we're talking about, concerning making our living spaces functional ecosystems once again. How can we actually do that successfully? The 499 questions, I'm only going to answer 498 tonight. Not really, maybe about 33. And one that I get often is, what got you interested in conservation? And there actually was an event that got me interested. We lived in third grade. We moved into a new development in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey. And our house was built on a circle. It was called Oak Park because oaks are what they had cut down in order to make the development. But our house was the first house to be built on that circle, and then they built them from right to left. So the lot to the left of us was undeveloped for a full year after we moved in. And there was a little pond on that lot, just like this. And I used to go over there almost every day and see what was happening. And what was happening in the spring was toads came and started to sing. I don't remember whether I knew they were males or not, but pretty soon bigger toads came and the singers gave them a hug. And I thought that was very nice. They kept hugging them. This, of course, is external fertilization. The males are hugging the females lay eggs, and the males fertilize them as the eggs are coming out. Those eggs then hatch into pollywogs, and I had a lot of fun watching them grow. I watched the hind legs pop out, then the front legs popped out, and the tail started to get shorter, and then it disappeared altogether. And when they come out into the land, they are tiny, tiny little things. Well, I wanted to be there the day that those little guys hopped out onto the ground, and I was. But that was the same day the bulldozer came and buried that pond. So all the toads were lost. I don't think he saw me sitting there, but I escaped. So that made an impression on me. The wisdom of the day, of course, is that we have to save the nature that is not already destroyed. We have to save pristine habitats. I thoroughly bought into that. But we have to move beyond that because very few people have the opportunity to save pristine habitats these days. I think we have to move beyond it into restoration. What interests me is that it didn't occur to me to walk right across into my backyard and dig another pond. I could have done that easily. My parents probably would have helped me. I could have saved a lot of the things in that pond, but it never occurred to me. Okay, another question. Why can't insects adapt quickly to non-native plants? It's a good question because we know that insects can develop insecticide resistance very quickly in just a few generations. And this is how that works. There's an intense selection pressure from insecticides, but a few of the individuals that are out there already have resistance to that insecticide. So they're the ones that survive. Everybody else gets killed. Then the next generation, There's a lot more resistance out there. In the next generation, almost everybody's resistant, and finally, everybody is resistant. So that happens in just a few generations. And people wonder, why can't insects adapt to new host plants in the same way? Well, there's actually no adaptation necessary for the population to become resistant. They already had that resistance in the population. And that is not true when it comes to an insect adopting a new host plant. There's all sorts of genetic changes that have to happen in the sensory apparatus on an insect for it to accept a new host plant. The first thing it has to do is find that host plant in an array of other plants. Remember that this is a new plant and there's lots of other plants out there. So the insect has to fly around and smell the smell of that plant and accept it as a host plant. Now it's going to do that with its antennae because that's where the receptors are. So there has to be a genetic change in the receptors on the insect's antenna. We'll talk about a red spotted purple here. The next thing they're going to do is land on that potential host plant and taste it again with their feet. There are more receptors on the tarsi of their feet, so there have to be genetic changes simultaneously in the receptors on their feet that says this is a good host plant. And that's what she's doing there. Then finally, she has even more receptors on her ovipositor. Before she lays an egg, she's essentially tasting the plant again to see whether it is the correct plant. So there has to be simultaneous changes in those receptors as well. Then she lays her egg. Red spotted purple lays the egg right at the tip of a black cherry leaf, so you can find them out there. The caterpillar will hatch. It will eat the eggshell because that's where a lot of protein is. But then it has to find the new host plant that it's on acceptable. It's got to taste it and recognize it as a potential host. So there have to be receptors change in the caterpillar's mouthpart receptors. And it has to be able to physiologically digest that new plant. All plants have defensive chemicals, and it's got to be able to handle them. So all those things have to happen at the same time. They have to be able to detect the plant among an array of other plants. They have to smell the plant, the leaf waxes. That's what gives off the odor with sensors on their tarsi and their ovipositor. The hatchling has to accept the taste of the new plant and be able to detoxify its defenses. Now that's called a host switch. They do happen, but not very often at all. It's very difficult for all those things to happen at the same time. Let's look at the monarch butterfly as an example. It, of course, is a specialist on plants in the lineage Asclepias, in the milkweed lineage. Well, we introduced black swallowwort 170 years ago as an ornamental plant. It is in the lineage of milkweeds. It's not Asclepias, but it smells a lot like milkweed. So it fools the monarch. The monarch detects it, lands on it, accepts it as a host plant, lays an egg on it, and that's where the whole thing falls apart. The egg hatches and the larva cannot eat black swallowwort. So there we go. Even after 170 years of opportunity, that final bit of adaptation has not occurred. Just to show you how difficult it really is for a new host switch to happen. Okay, related question. You claim it takes thousands of years, if ever, for an insect to adapt to a new plant. But some other entomologists disagree, and they point to several species of butterflies that now breed successfully on non-native plants. How do you explain that? Well, I explain that this way. I just explain host switching. Very difficult, doesn't happen very often. What the question is referring to is host range expansion. That is another way that insects can start using a new plant, except it's not really a new plant. These are usually very closely related plants, plants that are closely related to the existing host plant of the insect. So a host range expansion does not require any new adaptations. The insect already is adapted to eating that particular lineage, and that's why it can happen so quickly. I'll use the black swallowtail as an example. It, of course, is a specialist on the carrot family, but it can eat pretty much any plant in the carrot family. So when we import Queen Anne's lace or carrots or dill or parsley, it already has all the adaptations necessary to use that plant successfully. So that's not a new adaptation to a new plant. It's one that already existed. But even considering host range expansion and how often that does happen, there's still a 90% reduction in the number of caterpillars that can use a new plant when we introduce it. So still a big hit on our ecosystems. Why do insects fly towards lights? Now, we've been trying to answer that question for more than 100 years, and it turns out that one of the original hypotheses is probably the correct one. It's called the dorsal light response. Insects orient towards light so that it's coming down from the top. Otherwise, they'd fly upside down. So when we have an artificial light out there, they're always flying with their back to the light, which means they go around and around and around. Eventually, they actually bang into it, and often it kills them. Now, the light source for nocturnal insects is the moon, and it emits mostly wavelengths in the UV spectrum. It's why nocturnal insects are so attracted to UV light. But this light pollution is a huge problem for insect populations. When I was growing up, I could look at a street light, and that's what I saw at all the street lights. You can look at a street light now, and you don't see anything. There is global insect decline. We've lost a lot of insects, and light pollution is one of the major causes of that. These are all the ways that lights are killing our nocturnal insects. And there are a lot of lights out there, so it's one of the problems that we have. But it has a very simple solution. Knowing now why insects move towards light and what types of light attract them makes it easy for us to avoid that. All we have to do is use yellow wavelengths. That's the other end of the wavelength spectrum, because nocturnal insects are not attracted to lights in the yellow wavelengths, warm lights. So if we switched out our white bulbs that are much closer to the blue or the ultraviolet with a yellow bulb, we're not attracting insects anymore, so we would save millions of insects. And if we use LEDs, we could save millions of dollars as well. Of course, turning out the lights is an option, believe it or not. And I encourage you to visit the Dark Skies website, which tells you all the ways you can minimize light and all the benefits of actually turning them out. We are putting tons and tons and tons and tons of carbon into the atmosphere, generating electricity to make these lights run, and we do it just out of habit. It's really, we go way overboard in terms of our security. Okay, I live in an area with lots of Lyme disease. Now, websites are telling people you should have giant lawns because ticks don't like the lawns. You should get rid of your stick piles, brush piles, because ticks like brush piles, and otherwise you'll get Lyme disease. Of course, if you do that, it's not really what we're talking about here in terms of regenerating biodiversity at home. So how can we do that without getting Lyme disease? It's a good question. But let's think about what deer ticks need to survive in our landscapes. Deer ticks don't eat native plants. So having native plants does not create ticks. They don't eat leaf litter. They don't eat brush piles. They eat blood. So what generates deer ticks is sources of the hosts that they depend on. And they have a complex life cycle. They mate on deer, so you need to have a lot of deer around, and that's why we got a lot of ticks. Our deer populations have exploded, and they need an alternate host, and it's typically white-footed mice or other rodents. So a good way to reduce infectivity rates in your yard, in your habitat, is to increase the number of dead-end hosts. This is research by the Carey Institute in New York. So when you increase the species and abundance of other mammals in your landscape, many of these are dead-end hosts. So the ticks will bite these guys. The Borrelia, that's what causes the disease, will move into their bloodstream, and often that's the end of it. They're not going to pass it on. And that reduces the chances that they would pass it on to you quite a bit. A good example of this occurs in the South. There are lots of deer in the South. There are lots of deer ticks in the South, but there's very little Lyme disease. Why is that? Because they've got lizards. They've got anoles, and they've got skinks and some other lizards, and they're all dead-end hosts. So the ticks bite these guys, and the disease is not passed on. How do we, in the meantime, we still have too many deer. So how do we reduce the chances of picking up a tick in our yard? We have to know how ticks get on us. They don't run after us. They climb up on vegetation, which is why they don't like grass, because they like taller vegetation. And they put out their little eggs, and when you walk by, they grab onto you. It's called questing. So when you build a landscape like this that has a swath of grass down the middle, you can easily walk through without brushing up against vegetation. But at the same time, there are a lot of productive native plants in this landscape. So you're doing many of the things that I talk about all the time. We're shrinking the area of lawn, which we absolutely have to do, which means we're managing the watershed in a more responsible way. We're sequestering a lot of carbon in our landscape that lawn doesn't do. So we're helping pollinators, we're supporting viable food webs, and we're increasing the percentage of native plants in our landscapes, all by designing a landscape that helps us avoid ticks. Okay, plants and animals have always moved around the planet, so the arrival of new species at our shores is a natural process. So what's the big deal? If the new species are more fit than the species already here, then they deserve to replace them. It's an interesting philosophy, but there's really two questions here. What's the big deal about new species arriving, and are new species more fit? Okay, let's deal with each one. The big deal is the rate at which new species are arriving at our shores. Yes, plants and animals have always moved around the globe, but typically at the same rate the continents moved around. It was very, very slow. You might add a couple species every million years or so, slow enough so that the communities they joined were able to adapt to them. We are bringing in thousands and thousands of species in an instant of evolutionary time. So in the last, I don't know, 70 years, we've brought in 3,300 species of non-native plants and a lot of other things too. Way, way more species than our native communities can adapt to. Are new species more fit? No, they are not. Now, we used to think they were. They definitely were out-competing our native plants. But why are they out-competing them? Because they have left their natural enemies behind. There are no diseases attacking these plants. There are no insects, or very few insects attacking these plants. And here's the big one. The deer don't like them. So if an oak pops up in your landscape, the deer will eat it immediately, but they're not going to eat the autumn olive. They're not going to eat the burning bush. They're not going to eat the bush honeysuckle. And that's naturally what we have left over. So again, it's related to overabundance of deer. That's what's making these plants look like they're super plants. I went to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, not this year, but last year, I guess. And the first thing I noticed is that there's a really healthy understory. That's what a healthy understory looks like. And it'd been a long time since I'd seen a healthy understory. So I asked the ranger next to me, how do you control your deer? And he said, well, we don't control our deer. I said, well, how come you got a healthy understory? He said, well, we've got black bear, we've got coyotes, and we've got bobcats, and we don't shoot them. And that is enough to keep the deer under control. Now, wolves are the major predator of deer, and they don't have any wolves, but it's still enough to keep the deer under control. So putting predators back does work if you're able to do that. This is what it looks like in the landscapes near me. This is Japanese stiltgrass. There's no understory at all because the deer have eaten it all, and that includes spicebush, which they don't like. They're really hungry these days. So there's no recruitment of new trees or shrubs into a landscape like this, which if you do that for a couple of generations, that you have lost your forest entirely. What about the risk of bringing nature into everyday spaces? Isn't interacting with nature dangerous? I get this question a surprising number of times. You know, nature used to be dangerous, and that's why we inherently think it still is. Lions used to eat us, and water buffalo used to stomp us, and crocodiles and hyenas. It was a dangerous place out there, but it's been a long time since I saw a lion or a water buffalo or a crocodile in my landscape. Let's look at what is really killing us out there. Now, snake bites, it's real. We have about 2 deaths a year, and that's pretty consistent. West Nile virus is probably the biggest natural killer these days, about 130 people per year. Most of them are quite old. But look what's killing us. Alcohol, 75,000 deaths per year. Melanoma from sunbathing, about 8,000 a year, and we're adding 76,000 new cases every year. Car crashes, 44,000. Tragically, child overheating in our cars, 550 deaths a year. Dogs are killing 20 to 30 of us a year, falling about 20,000 of us. Big one, of course, is overdoses. Now it's dropping recently, but it's still nearly 100,000 deaths a year. Here, this is the interesting part. Texting, 3,000 deaths in texting just in 2013. Autoerotic asphyxiation, whatever that is, 600 deaths a year. Hot dogs are killing 70 people. Lightning, 51. High school football, 20. Vending machines. We pull vending machines over on top of us, 13 deaths a year. Toasters, 370 deaths per year. Flat screens TVs fall off the wall and have killed 41 of us. That's just in 2011. Selfies, 379 people between 2008 and 2021. So selfies are 13 times more deadly than venomous snakes. Alcohol is 577 times more deadly than West Nile virus. But we deal with these things because we manage the risk. We manage the risk. Can you guess how many people were killed by native plant gardening last year? Okay, philosophical question. Should we kill invasive species? Do we have the right to kill anything? To decide what plant lives, what plant dies? Good question. Well, those people who question our right to manage invasive species are making decisions about what lives and dies every single day. Every time you plant a plant that does not support local caterpillars, you're deciding whether the chickadee in your yard can feed its young or not, or whether those babies are going to starve to death. When you have a lawn like this, you are excluding hundreds of species of native plants and the thousands of animal species that depend on those plants, all starved. When we spray for mosquitoes, we're not just killing a few mosquitoes, we're killing our monarchs, our pollinators, the caterpillars that support our food webs, and essentially all the insects it comes in contact with. So if we don't control invasives like calorie pear here, we're gutting entire food webs. Do we have the right to do that? Why do you only focus on moths? Aren't butterflies important too? Well, ecologically, no. Butterflies are not that important. They're pretty. We love them. But look, they're just day-flying, bad-tasting moths. They come out right in the yellow part here. Butterflies, they evolved right in the middle of moth lineages, and they're very specialized. Most of them do taste bad, which is why they can fly during the day without getting eaten. And there's a lot of moths compared to butterflies. For every species of butterfly, there's 19 species of moths. But moths are much more important ecologically because they're critical parts of terrestrial food webs. They are transferring more energy from plants to other animals than any other type of plant eater, which is why Dan Jansen calls them the meat and potatoes or the bread and butter of terrestrial food webs. If we design landscapes without a lot of caterpillars in them, we're going to have failed food webs and eventually failed ecosystems. That makes caterpillars really important. And besides, moths are really cool. Some of them look like rhinoceroses. Some of them look like fish, and that is not photoshopped. A lot of them look like algae or spaceships or stealth bombers or lichens. Look at this guy. Looks just like a lichen. Many of them look like bird poop. If you look like bird poop, nothing's going to eat you. Or they disguise themselves by sewing the petals of the flowers that they're eating on their back with silk. They can look exactly like the needles, conifer eaters will look just like the needles that they're eating. There's 1, 2 caterpillars in here. Or they look exactly like the flower buds that they're eating. That's a caterpillar right there. This is, in my opinion, the best leaf mimic in the world. Lives in Asia. So they look a lot like dead leaves. They can look like seeds. They can look like seed pods. And many of them look like sticks, both as caterpillars and as adults. Or they look like jet planes. They look like clowns. They've got lightning logos on their sides. Some of them are really huge, and some of them are really small. That's a pinhead right there. Many of them are beautiful as adults or as larvae, or they're not. They're just kind of plain looking. There's a startle effect. They spread their wings and scare you. You think they're an owl or something. Some of them have 2 heads. Not really. Somebody believed me once when I said that. That's a mating pair there. That's why it's got 2 heads. Some incredible snake mimicry going on with caterpillars. This is actually a sphinx moth caterpillar, but it looks a lot like a snake. Good mimicry, making them look like yellow jackets or beetles or jewels or that. So I just think they're very cool. Okay, do honeybees compete with native bees? Good question with a very unpopular answer. Let's talk about honeybees a little bit. They are extreme generalists, meaning they can go to lots of different types of plants. And whether or not they're pollinating them, they are using the pollen and the nectar for their own use. A single honeybee hive can house 30,000 bees. And honeybees can forage up to 2 miles from that hive, which means a single hive can potentially compete with native bees over 8,000 acres of land. That's one honeybee hive. Now, beekeepers supplement their hives with sugar so that there's always a lot of bees in there, even when there's not a lot of flowers out there to support them. As of April 2022, there were 2.92 million hives in the U.S., which means honeybees have saturated the continental U.S. 11.5 times. Now, if we assume that the native bee populations in nature are near their carrying capacity, meaning there's not more native bees out there than there are flowers to support them. They're right there at the top of their carrying capacity. So if you add a honeybee hive that has 30,000 bees in it to that area already saturated by native bees, there's no way that can happen without degrading the resource base of those bees. What about privet flowers? Privets are good sources of honey and pollen for honeybees. If we remove privet during our efforts to remove invasive species, then it's going to hurt honeybees. Or will it hurt honeybees? Well, privet is a big problem, particularly in the South. We have 9 species of privet that are highly invasive. This is one of them. That's me standing there, so that gives you an idea. When you have a privet invasion, you don't have anything else. It's just privet. Now, privet blooms in Alabama alone, there's 1 million acres covered by privet. And of course, it's in all of our states. It blooms for about a week, so that's 1 week you have forage for honeybees and presumably some native bees as well. But what about the other 51 weeks out there? It looks like this, providing nothing, taking up space, excluding other flowering plants. So that's why it hurts honeybees and all bees, because most of the year it's providing nothing in a huge amount of space. How about those oak diseases? Oaks are killing oaks. These diseases are killing oaks in many parts of the country. This is a red oak in my yard that has been killed by the bacterial leaf scorch. So the question is, should we keep the wood on our property after the oak dies, or do we have to get rid of it to prevent the disease from spreading? Well, the disease spreads when the oak is still alive. And it's spread typically by sucking insects, things like tree hoppers and leaf hoppers that suck on a disease tree like this and fly to another one and spread the bacteria. But once the tree is dead, there's no sucking on there and there's no disease organisms in there. So I recommend keeping the wood on your property. It's called coarse woody debris, and if you have a chance to do it, you will help an awful lot of organisms, like collembolans. This is just one type of collembolan, a little spinthurid. There are millions of them that are associated with downed wood. Then you have the predators that eat those things, like centipedes. You've got millipedes eating the fungus on those woods. Click beetles, that's where they breed. Their larvae are in dead wood like that. This is the fire-colored beetle. If you peel up bark, you often find this larva under there, which is interesting because you almost never see the adult. So where are the adults? Who knows? Scarabs. Many scarabs breed in downed wood. Cerambycid longhorn beetles create flat-headed borers. If you split wood, you might find these inside the wood. Leucatid stag beetles, they breed in dead wood. So do Psalid best beetles. So do buprested metallic wood-boring beetles. It also supplies an overwintering site for many of some of our butterflies, like mourning cloaks, like commas, like question marks. They actually overwinter as adults in the cracks of downed wood. How about carpenter bees? Carpenter bees start to eat the wood on our decks and our soffits of our houses because we remove the wood that they actually use in nature. If we put it back, they'll have some place to breed. And how about carpenter ants? Carpenter ants, by the way, do not eat wood. They simply hollow out the rotting part and make a nest in it. And we want carpenter ants because that's what many of our woodpeckers eat. That's what pileated woodpeckers and flickers and red-bellied woodpeckers feed their young. So without carpenter ants, we lose those woodpeckers. There we go. Dependent on carpenter ants. And you need the wood to make those carpenter ants. Okay, is rearing monarchs good or bad? Well, it depends on why you're rearing them. There's two reasons that people rear monarchs: for fun, and we're talking about really rearing any kind of butterfly, for fun or for educational purposes, or for conservation. Now, I think there's a lot of benefits to rearing them for educational purposes or for fun. It's a great way for kids to learn about insects. They learn about the life stages, about complete metamorphosis, the egg, the larva, the pupa, the adult. They learn about host plant specialization without ever having to mention that. But kids know that if you don't have milkweeds, you don't have monarchs. But when you rear them for conservation, then we often run into trouble. It's a great way to spread diseases. It's very difficult to rear these guys en masse without crowding them. And if there's any disease organism, it usually spreads. Even if you don't know that it's there, they're carrying it around. It also removes those insects from natural selection. A lot of things are working for or against the monarchs in nature, and you removed all that natural selection pressure. So eventually, if we do that a lot, we're releasing weakened populations into nature. If you really want to help monarchs, this is the way to do it. Have a large milkweed patch. Give them the opportunity to breed the way they always have. That will help monarchs more than anything else. Well, the monarchs I have on my milkweed keep disappearing. Just when they get big, they disappear. And I assume birds are eating them, but I thought monarch caterpillars tasted bad. So I'm confused. What's stealing my monarchs? Nothing is stealing your monarchs. They're just not forming their chrysalis on milkweeds. They always move off the host plant and form it someplace else. So this is a chrysalis I found in my yard. And look, it's on a grass blade. This is a pipevine swallowtail in my yard. It's on another grass blade. The reason they're crawling off their host plant is because their natural enemies, the parasitoids and things that eat these guys, seek out the host plant and then look for the caterpillars or the chrysalis. So they want to get as far away from the host plant as they can before they make their chrysalis. So the bottom line is that nothing's taking your monarchs, nothing's taking your black swallowtails or your pipevine swallowtails. They're simply forming their chrysalis someplace where you are not looking. What are those orange and black bugs on my milkweed? Should I kill them? Why is the default always to kill something? You don't know what it is, so you kill it? We are a nasty species. There's several things that are black and orange on milkweed. It's a warning coloration telling predators they taste bad. Don't bother with me. And one of them is the giant or the large milkweed bug, Onchopeltis fasciatus. They show up in midsummer, maybe the end of July, and what they do, the reason they don't show up until then is because they eat milkweed seeds. So they have to wait until the milkweed pods form. They have sucking mouth parts. So they stick those mouth parts through the pod and eat the seeds. But you might wonder how they eat seeds. Their mouth part is like a straw. How do you suck up a solid seed through the straw? Well, that's why you often have a lot of them on a particular pod. It's called feeding facilitation. They don't suck up the solid seed. They digest it externally by spitting digestive enzymes on that seed, and then the seed turns to mush, and they all get to suck it up. And when they do it together, it's much more efficient. It's easier to eat than when they try to do it singly. So people get upset, oh, they're going to eat all my milkweed seeds. No, they're not. The milkweed seeds are layered in your pod. You can open it up and look at that. They get the first layer, but they can't reach the other ones. So most of your milkweed seeds will still remain viable. You might notice that in mid-September, late September, depending on where you live, they all disappear. And they disappear because they migrate, just like the monarch. They migrate down to the Gulf Coast where milkweeds continue to make pods. These guys only eat milkweed seeds. These are nymphs, by the way. Another black and orange creature on milkweed is the milkweed tussock moth. And they're gregarious. When a female lays her eggs, she lays all her eggs on one milkweed plant. So they hatch out. As last instars, they're orange and black, and they're actually quite pretty. The reason they're gregarious is it helps them get around that sticky latex sap. As adults, they're not so pretty. But again, the way to support all of these things, there's many other things that are orange and black on your milkweeds. Milkweed, cerambycid, longhorn beetles, a couple species of them. You can share your milkweed resource with all of those guys if you have enough milkweed. So plant a big patch and you can keep everybody, including the monarch, happy. Could you provide your thoughts on the use of southern, more heat-tolerant species within our more northern parts of the U.S.? This is called assisted migration, and people talk about it a lot because of climate change. They say, well, we've got to move our plants up from the south so that because in the future, they'll do well in the south. It'll be too hot for them in the southern parts. Well, this is what climate change is really doing. We've got the jet stream in the old days that went across the country, and it would wobble a little bit, but typically it was cold up here and warmer down here. With climate change, this is what we have. The jet stream has gone crazy. It's much more wobbly. And when it goes way north, then you're unusually warm up here, even in the wintertime. But when it goes way south, then you're unusually cold way down here. Remember this winter? Baton Rouge got 9 inches of snow. It got down to 9 degrees. That never happened before. So climate change is not a gradual warming of a space. It's an increase in the climate variability. And if we start taking southern plants and planting them up here, these polar vortices that we keep having more and more each winter are going to kill them. Also, if we start moving plants a good deal from where they co-evolve with the things around them, you're going to remove them from their local food web. One of the major advantages or ecological roles that plants play is to capture energy from the sun, turn it into food, and pass it on to animals, typically through caterpillars. And if you move the plants away from the range of those caterpillars, then it's just like introducing another invasive plant. It's not going to contribute to the local food web. So I think the best strategy, now this is controversial, a lot of people disagree with me, but I think the best strategy is to hope that our plants have the genetic variability necessary to handle the crazy weather swings that we have created. What do you think of No Mow May? I think it's a good intention, but not such a good idea. Ecologically, it makes no sense. This is what it looks like when you don't mow your lawn. This was a house near me that went through foreclosure, and they had a really nice lawn, and they just stopped mowing it. And this is what it looks like when it's tall. Grass is not a great pollinator plant. So you've got tall grass that's still not helping the pollinators. If you have a terrible lawn that's full of dandelions and dead nettle and white clover, then you have generalist pollinators that come during May, but then in June you mow it and pull the rug out from under them. Pollinators need resources from right now, mid-March. The pussy willows are in bloom all the way through early November, believe it or not. So mowing your lawn from June on is not going to help the pollinators. This is what we really need is no-mow areas where we never mow them. And we call that a pollinator garden. And you want as much variation in here as possible in terms of when the plants are blooming so that the pollinators have forage all season long. What do you think of Miyawaki forests? Those are call them tiny forests. It was a reforestation method developed by Akira Miyawaki. He was a Japanese forester back in the 70s. And it caught on Japan, but didn't spread very, very far back in the 70s. But it's spreading now. It's a very popular approach to getting a lot of plant material in a small space, particularly in urban areas. So the idea is to plant very densely. What you're doing is planting canopy trees very densely so that you're going to minimize weeding. It's very difficult to penetrate a space like this. Get a lot of plant material into a space very quickly and increase the diversity of the plants and then supposedly the diversity of the insects as well. Those are the advantages. The plant costs are low because the plants themselves are very, very small. Weeding is reduced, which is a big issue when you're getting a restoration going. The disadvantages are that over time, those plants are going to compete with each other and many of them will be lost. And originally I thought, well, gee, why don't we just plant a few trees? Well, after you plant a few trees, then you've got to maintain the area around it. You've got to keep it mowed or mulched or weeded or something. And this method reduces that. It also is a long time before those trees are contributing a whole bunch. But when you've got a really densely planted space, they can contribute a lot very quickly. So I've changed my mind. I think it's a good idea. And I now have a grad student who's starting to study Miyawaki forest so we can actually measure some of these predictions. I often find the expense of purchasing native plants is out of my budget. Do you have any suggestions? Well, I'll tell you what Rick Dark would suggest. He would suggest addition by subtraction. So rather than planting a bunch of native plants that you have to go buy, let nature do it. And your job is to simply remove the plants you don't want, typically the invasive non-natives. So this is what part of my yard looked like a few years ago. I planted the Ilex verticillata. I planted the acorn, well, yeah, it's an oak tree, but I planted it as an acorn. But I did not plant the andropogon. I did not plant any of these asters. I did not plant the milkweeds. I did not plant the goldenrod. They all came in on their own. All I did was manage the invasive plants. So who's helping me? It's the red squirrels, it's the gray squirrels, it's the chipmunks, and the blue jays, of course. Ants are moving plants around, the seeds around. Typically are spring ephemerals that have these elaiosomes on them. This is the bloodroot seed. The elaiosomes, ants love elaiosomes. So they take these seeds back to the nest, they eat the elaisome, they throw the seed in the garbage den. Every ant nest has a little garbage den, and it's about an inch below the surface of the soil, and the seed will germinate there. So it's a perfect distribution of spring ephemeral seeds. But this is what you have to do. You have to watch out for those nasty guys. When they germinate, then you've got to weed them out. But this is like 3 inches tall. One little whack with your hand whacker, and they're gone. I've been told that all annuals or weeds have little wildlife value, should always be replaced by perennials. Is this true? Well, first of all, remember what a weed is. It's a plant out of place. Are all annuals out of place? No. I think that idea is preposterous. Annuals play a really important ecological role in our landscapes, particularly in early successional habitats or constantly disturbed habitats like wetlands. This is jewelweed. Hummingbirds depend on that tremendously as soon as it's in bloom. Everybody doesn't have a hummingbird feeder up. And there are a whole bunch of specialist insects that depend on annual plants, like the painted shinny, a beautiful moth that depends on Indian blanket. Cuculio asteroides depends on native asters, like horseweed. Oh, every time I do that. Sorry. How do we get this guy to move along here? There we go. Goldenrod stowaway is a specialist on, it has nothing to do with goldenrod. It's a specialist on Biden's Aristosa, which is another annual. And that's what it looks like. Beautiful, beautiful plant. There's even several specialists that depend on ragweed, like the common spraguea, the ragweed flower moth. I know we don't like ragweed, but if we call it by its genus name, ambrosia, then it's not so bad. Okay, do you have a succinct statement to submit to my HOA who recently cited me for growing weeds? Well, I've got a lot of statements. I don't know if they're succinct, but try this. We humans face life-threatening crises from climate change and biodiversity loss. Reducing the area of lawn and using more productive native plants in our landscapes addresses both of these crises. This can be done tastefully without the use of chemicals and without destroying or reducing property values. It is the future of landscaping. Hope that works. Another HOA question. My HOA believes that native plants reduce property values. How can I convince them otherwise? By showing them that it does not reduce property values. This is a landscape designed by Lynn O'Shaughnessy, 100% native landscape, but you don't get more formal than that. And there's no HOA that would say that's too sloppy to have in my neighborhood. This is a 100% non-native landscape. So we've got non-native azaleas, we've got English ivy, we've got pachysandra, we've got Norway maple. It doesn't look good because it's not being taken care of. So whether or not your property meets HOA standards is a function of management. It's not a function of the plants in that landscape. This is a 100% native landscape except for the lawn, which is That's called a queue for care. It's where we walk. But there's no HOA that would be upset with a landscape like this. So we need to provide these examples and show that nope, it doesn't reduce property values. As a matter of fact, more and more people are looking for landscapes like this because they're starting to value nature. I have a small property. Should I plant several individuals of a few species, or should I try to squeeze as much diversity onto the property as possible, where you only have one or two individuals of each species? Another good question. And the answer is it depends on what you're trying to manage for. Let's say we want to create a property that is going to help monarchs. Having one or two rabbits is not going to help the monarch because the monarchs will lay more than one egg on there and they'll strip it. They won't have enough food to complete their development. So if you're targeting monarchs, you want a lot of milkweed so that they have enough. If you're targeting native bees, bees want to forage in the most efficient way. So when you have a lot of flowers close to each other, they can move from flower to flower without using a lot of energy. So massing for pollinators is also a good idea. But we do want diversity in our yards, and most people don't have yards big enough to get a whole bunch of diversity in their yard. So this is a new neighborhood here, brand new, clean slate. Think of the opportunities if the people talk to each other and they divided up the ecosystem services that could be produced by this landscape. Some people could have more trees, create more shade. Some people could have the pollinator garden. Some people could have meadows. You divide it up, and then you get a lot of diversity in a relatively small space without it overwhelming any one property. How can I convince my neighbor to stop mosquito fogging? Mosquito fogging, of course, is a booming business around the country, and they tell us it's okay because what they're fogging is a natural organic product and it only kills mosquitoes. I mean, if that were true, I'd hire them too, but it's not true. Yeah, it's natural and organic, meaning that they're fogging pyrethroids, which is a product that we discovered from chrysanthemums. But being natural and organic does not make it totally safe. Cyanide is natural and organic. Ricin is natural and organic. And when they say it only kills mosquitoes, that's not even close to true. So what you want to do is find out what their motivation for spraying is. Now, a lot of people say, I want to protect my kids from mosquito-borne diseases. Okay, you can give them some fact about mosquito-borne diseases and the risk to their kids. Between 1999 and 2007, there were 3 kids who died from mosquito-borne diseases in the U.S. So that's 0.37 deaths per year. There are 73.2 million kids under the age of 16. So therefore, your child has a 1 in 197 million chance of dying from a mosquito-borne disease. In comparison, 1,095 kids die in car crashes every single year. So which is more dangerous? Of course, the cars are, but we manage that risk. You can also explain the cost, the ecological costs of fogging. Remember, people have been told that it only kills mosquitoes. Well, no, it kills all the insects that it comes in contact with, including our beloved monarchs, including the pollinators we're trying to encourage. And it doesn't control mosquitoes. That's the real key there. So give them an alternative. Show them how you can control mosquitoes using biological control. This is Bacillus thuringiensis, called mosquito dunks. What you do is you put a bucket in your yard and fill it full of water and let the mosquitoes lay their eggs in that bucket. Then you put in a mosquito dunk, $12 for a season's worth of control. And you can control your mosquitoes that way. If they're annoying, put a fan on your back porch or in your picnic table and sit in the directed breeze. You don't have to lather up with the mosquito repellent. Mosquitoes won't fly into directed breeze. So there are alternatives, and if you explain that to your neighbor, that might help. Why do you want us to keep leaves on our property? 3 basic reasons. Leaves protect the moisture that's required for the soil community. All members of the soil community require high humidity in the soil. It returns nutrients to the soil. Remember, your tree, all the nutrients your tree used this past year are locked up in these leaves. We've got to get those nutrients back into the soil so that your tree can use it again. And it provides habitat. There are more species that live in the soil than above the soil, and they all require high humidity. So that's what the leaves are doing. They're protecting that soil humidity even in times of drought. When I say more species, I'm talking about a lot of things. 250,000 mites, 100,000 springtails, 90,000 proturans. Those are primitive insects, a million nematodes. They're all breaking down those leaves, returning the nutrients to the soil. Some of our very beautiful butterflies eat dead leaves as caterpillars. This is the banded hair streak. That's what its caterpillars eat. There are 70 species of litter, we call them litter moths, that caterpillars develop on dead leaves, like the ambiguous litter moth, the American idea, the dark spotted palthus, and 67 others. And of course, lots of predators like ground beetles and many other things that are eating all of that life in your leaves. Excuse me. How about those fireflies, those lightning bugs? As larvae, they are predators in leaf litter. So when you rake away your leaf litter, you've just thrown away all of your fireflies. And of course, it's a wonderful place for our birds to forage, and they know that if you keep the leaf litter around. Where are you going to put it? I think we should build big beds around all of our trees, and that's where the leaf litter goes. Won't the leaves kill the plants around my trees, though? No, it depends on how thick you put it. At 5 feet thick, yes, it will. But a normal layer of leaf litter, our plants are very good at getting through those leaves. Who was raking the leaves before we got here? Nobody. And there were plants in North America. I read about it someplace. Look at these are wood poppies in my yard coming right up through the leaf. It's what it looks like a few days later. These are violets. Delicate little violets coming up through leaf litter, and you don't have to rake it at all for these things to happen. So we spend a lot more time raking than we need to. And well, here's another question: can I mulch my leaves? You can, of course, and a lot of people do that to make them look prettier. But when you're running them through the lawnmower, you're chopping up all the life things that are in there. There is a cocoon right there, a moth cocoon in this leaf litter. Of course, you never would have seen that when you're raking and you throw it away. It belongs to the dot line white, a very beautiful moth. And that's just one of the things that is hiding in your leaf litter. Do cultivars of native plants have the same ecological value as their parent species? It depends on what the cultivar trait is. Some cultivars are just as good, some are terrible. And we just have to figure out which are which. This is Phlox paniculata Jenna. It is a cultivar. It's a natural variant that was found in Georgia, in the mountains of Georgia, and brought in. They put a cultivar name on it, but it has twice the flowers as the straight species. And guess what? It supports twice the pollinators. We did a study looking at 6 traits common for woody plants. Enhanced fall color, leaf variegation, taking a tall plant, making it short, introducing disease resistance, enhanced fruiting. This is the big one, taking green leaves and making them red or purple. Those are very common cultivar traits. We grew them in a common garden for 3 years, and we found that the only trait that consistently reduced insect use was taking a green leaf and making it red or purple, because that loads the leaf with anthocyanins, which are feeding deterrents. But the others didn't impact insects at all. Fooling with flowers often is a little bit more detrimental, particularly if you make double flowers. This is bloodroot, of course, double flower. It's beautiful, but you've taken the reproductive parts of the flower and turned them into petals. So it has absolutely no value to pollinators. If you want the latest on what's happening in the trial gardens of Mount Cuba Center in Hockessin, Delaware, go to their website, and all of their trials with cultivars and the straight species in terms of their impact on pollinators is on that website. So it's a wonderful resource. Does urban restoration work? Or are you encouraging ecological traps that will lure animals to their death? That is a really important question, and we need a lot more research to answer that question. But so far, the evidence is supporting that what we're doing is actually a good thing. Emily Geist in Omaha, Nebraska, Brian Cutting in Newark, Delaware, have done work with monarchs in suburban gardens, reared in suburban gardens versus natural areas. And in both cases, they found much higher survivorship in the urban suburban gardens. So that's good news. Look what we'll call it citizen science, just call it the average landowner has done for bluebirds. In the late 60s and 70s, bluebird populations were in steep decline because we had cut down most of the snags that have the cavities in them that bluebirds need. We also introduced starlings and house sparrows that outcompeted the bluebirds in the cavities that were around. But then bluebird boxes caught up and bluebird trails caught on, and more people are doing that. And now bluebirds are one of the most common birds in our suburban neighborhoods. A guy named Benedict Schmidt in Switzerland has done some really interesting work with amphibians in Argua. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's an urban area in Switzerland. There were 10 species of amphibians, of different frogs and salamanders, that were declining rapidly in this urban area. So Benedict Schmidt dug artificial ponds, put them all around the urban area. And despite the roads and all the traffic and everything else, every population of amphibian increased dramatically, except for one. The one that did not increase needed larger ponds than what he provided. But it shows that even in urban areas, we can increase the populations of things that are really threatened in other areas. So that's all very encouraging, but we do need a lot more research in this regard. And then finally, what gives you hope? How do you not become discouraged by the task at hand? Well, I'll admit there are days where I wake up and read the news and I get discouraged. But generally, there are several reasons why I am hopeful. One of them is that the biodiversity crisis is now it's part of the public discourse globally. The UN has met twice to discuss resolutions about the biodiversity crisis. There was just a meeting in Paris, attended by every country in the world except the US. To try to deal with the very, very serious biodiversity crisis. So talking is, it's step one. It's good. We recognize that there's a problem. But what really is encouraging me is that the public is starting to recognize that as individuals, we're not powerless. We actually can be important forces in conservation. And that's important because the public owns most of the land that is out there. We've talked a lot about shrinking the lawn, and people are starting to do it. Got 44 million acres of lawn, by the way, and that's an ecological deadscape. So the more we reduce, the better off we're going to be. We're learning about the keystone plant concept, and more people are planting it. These are the plants that support the most caterpillars that run our food web. We've talked about modifying our lights, and people are starting to do that. Mosquito fogging is starting to get a bad name. More people are recognizing that this is not a good idea. We're starting to put beds under our trees. This creates what Heather Holm calls soft landings. The caterpillars that develop in the tree fall out of the tree to pupate, and the land underneath these trees is not compacted because we're not mowing it and we're not walking under it. So they can get underground and they can spin their cocoons, much higher survivorship. More and more people are putting in pollinator gardens. There's these pollinator pathways all across the country. People are working on it. That's very helpful. We're removing the invasive plants. Fewer nurseries are selling them, and some states are actually banning them. Municipalities are helping pay for this. We've got cost-sharing programs in Minnesota and Pennsylvania and Virginia and some other places that are helping homeowners convert their lawn to appropriate plants in their ecoregion. Again, the banning of the sale of native plants is increasing. Delaware has done it. Delaware, Massachusetts, Oregon, South Carolina have selectively banned particular invasive plants. So this is spreading, all good. HOAs are learning that small properties and properties in gated communities can be beautiful, even if we use native plants. So the pressure from HOAs is decreasing. Even in agriculture, we're learning some very important lessons. The reason the monarch and our native bees have declined is because we took the quote weeds, the native plants like milkweeds and ironwood and joe pye weed and goldenrods and asters, away from the roadside and our corn and our soybeans and our wheat, and we planted grass, which supports nothing. But people are learning that we can put it back. Iowa is leading the way in this regard. Also, very, very important work with prairie strips right through the corn and the soybeans. Wonderful resource for pollinators, but it also intercepts the flow of water off of agriculture. So it intercepts topsoil and it intercepts all of the extra nutrients. So it's a win-win for everybody. But what's encouraged me more than anything else is the speed with which these changes are happening. I've been talking about this for at least 20 years, and I didn't think anybody would listen, but they are listening, and that's really, really encouraging. Robert Swan recently said the greatest threat to our planet is believing that someone else will save it. Well, more and more people are realizing it's not going to be somebody else. It's going to be you. It's going to be everybody. You are nature's best hope. So thanks very much. There are the websites that I cited. You can copy them down.
Great. We do have some comments and questions. Somebody spoke about a two bees in a podcast session, and I looked it up and I pasted that in the chat. It talks about honeybees and native bees in greater detail. Then the first question is, what might cause vertical splits in the bark that seem to start within 18 inches of the ground and run up several feet on the main trunk, probably 10 to 12 feet above the ground?
Well, I did that to a cherry tree once in my former life. I'm an entomologist. I didn't know anything about plants, so I fertilized it like crazy, and the tree grew faster than the bark could expand, and it split it. So that is one cause of bark split. Of course, if the tree is actually dead, the bark will split eventually. But I'll bet you are over fertilizing your tree.
Okay. The next one says praying mantises are a cool insect, but no native type lives in the Northeast. Do you condone eradicating them? I found 24 in a 200 square foot flower garden once.
Well, it depends on where the Northeast you're talking about. We do actually have Carolina mantid up here in Southeast Pennsylvania, but that's the only native species. There are more species as you move farther south. So you're probably talking about the Chinese mantid, which is the big guy. Um, it's an invasive species. We brought it in. It sits on flowers and eats our bees, our honeybees, and our native bees. There are many records of Chinese mantid eating hummingbirds. So it's not doing us a whole lot of good. And I know it's a big, cool insect, and people don't want to just go out and kill it. I don't encourage you to kill anything. The easiest way to control your Chinese mantid is to collect the egg masses and just put them in the freezer. And then it'll be better.
Okay. Someone says a friend insists that the local coyote population in Massachusetts is nothing but coy dogs and they should be eradicated. I say they are eastern coyotes. What are your thoughts?
Well, a coy dog is a coyote that has come up through Canada and mated with wolves and then come back down into the US. So nothing but coy dogs. It's a natural hybridization that occurred. They're a little bit bigger than the western coyote. They are the only top predators we have in the Northeast for deer. The overabundance of deer is a serious, serious problem, and to shoot them for no reason makes no sense to me. I wish them luck. If you're worried about your cat or your dog, keep them inside.
Okay. The next one says, with today's political climate on many issues affecting our lives, who should we look towards to believe what is happening in climate change and how it is impacting the phenology in our environment? Where should we go to get truthful information?
Well, if you had a toothache, would you go to a politician or the dentist to find out what was happening? I suggest you consult your scientist before he gets fired, by the way, because they're the ones doing the original research. And it's easy to figure out what is bogus information and what is not. You consider the source. Where is it coming from? I wouldn't trust any politician on any issue. They simply want to get voted for again. So they say what they think you want to hear. So go to the original source. There's a ton of information out there. You know, all of the climate data that's erased from the government websites is not erased from other websites. So it's easy to get information. And thousands of people have been working on this for many years. So there really is very, very little ambiguity about these serious issues.
Okay, someone says, how do hickory shells affect the soil? I have tons of them each year.
Yeah. Well, they last a long time. They don't break down very, very fast, but it is part of that coarse detritus that's on the ground. Um, in some way, I guess they're helping to maintain moisture. I don't have a good answer for you. I'm not sure just what they do for us because they do seem to last forever.
Okay. The next one says the recently published Birmingham University study indicating a 22% reduction in U.S. butterfly populations, including common species, over the last 20 years gained much attention. Your thoughts on this study?
It was a great study. The very best lepidopterists in the country participated with I think it's 76,000 data points in that study. It's a geographically diverse study, so it covers all the areas of the country. It was analyzed with the very latest statistical methods. You can believe it. Our butterflies are down 22% on average. Some populations are down more than that. So if you actually read that paper, which I did, I commented on it. It talks about more than just a 22% decline. It tells you exactly where and why they're declining, which groups are actually increasing, because a few did, but most of them are declining. So that's a good example of a superior study that you can really internalize. Believe that one.
Great. There are tons of people sending you love and saying wonderful things. They said, thank you so much. You gave us so much hope. So thank you for doing this. It was very informative and everybody really enjoyed it. And I'd like to invite everybody to our webinar tomorrow night, which is Ways to Honor Nature in Your Home Landscape with Susan Lee Anthony. And I hope everybody will come to our live expo at Kennedy's Country Gardens on Saturday from 10 to 2. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.